After the Masquerade, the masks come off, using the Unmasking Diary to explore the everyday process of neurodivergent autistic unmasking. Author Natasha Stavros, PhD, speaks with licensed marriage and family therapist Sarah Liebman, diagnosed ADHD with special interest all things neurodiverse. Join us in this episode of Following the Threads as we explore social, psychological, and spiritual frameworks that empower resilience through change. As a reminder, this podcast is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute counseling, psychotherapy, or mental health services. Listening to this podcast or communicating with the host and guests does not form a therapist-client relationship. The information here is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your own mental health professional with any questions you may have regarding a mental health condition. Welcome to Following the Threads. I'm Natasha Stavros.
And I'm Sarah Liebman.
Today's episode will be about disclosing your diagnosis to a lover. I was diagnosed in February, and to be honest, I hadn't really thought too much about how my diagnosis would affect my partner, but it did. After we talked about it, I found out he was stressed out about what it would mean for us and for our future. How would it change the roles and how we worked together? When we talked about how to get an adult neurodivergent assessment in episode 5, we talked about the need to set up a support system. And inevitably, you think about your lover. And so today we kick off the first in our mini-series on disclosure by talking about disclosing your diagnosis to them.
All right. I'm not going to sing any of the songs that word lover makes come into my mind.
And so I think when we had talked about this, Sarah, we had talked about sort of, there's almost like, magically 3 things. But, the first that we talked about was the revelation, the getting the diagnosis, and that a late autism, ADHD, or ADHD diagnosis doesn't automatically explain everything. And it's really just a starting point, not a solution. Partners may know something is different, and they have probably accepted you for that. But it can be really difficult to grasp the implications until they're actually living with those implications. And it can be really, really hard not to assign this to
the
moral
not good
failings,
enough.
the not good enough, you're not trying hard enough, and all these narratives that we build about someone we get to know.
Yeah. And I think that, as you were saying that, I was thinking there's so much about being in a long-term relationship that we're categorizing as our lover, that there already are explanations for everything. They may not be good ones. They may not be ones that, feel like they move us forward.
Or that you mutually agree upon.
Exactly. But that, you bring this revelation of hey, there's something else that's been going on the whole time that we didn't know about. Maybe we saw pieces of it. We understood it in certain ways. But here it is, right? And that revelation, as exciting and relieving and energizing as it can be, often bring something into the relationship or into the other person's life that they aren't particularly ready for, be prepared for, and maybe their readiness to shift their understanding of the narratives that are in the relationship isn't where yours is. And also they might start to see themselves in some things, and that is always uncomfortable and sometimes comes with a bigger backlash.
Yeah. We had talked about this, how very often people who are neurodivergent tend to attract other neurodivergent people because we're like-minded.
Yes.
We see similarities.
Birds of a feather.
Yeah. And so your partner may not be ready to accept the diagnosis that you have been obviously ready to go seek out for yourself.
That you kind of came to the end of everything else and said, no, I got to look at this. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's also known in my experience over the last, I guess, 10 plus years of this, it's like, it happens in regular therapy themes as well. Like if I'm starting to understand something about my relationship with my mother or my father, and I bring that to my partner, and unbeknownst to me, they've got some kind of defense they've already worked up. And I remember long ago, my husband said to me, well, if you can see your mother that way, then I might have to see my mother that way. And I'm not ready for that. And I was like, well, you seem like a good guy and I'm going to marry you. And also, what do I do with that? So, but there's they bring stuff into our lives. We both bring things into the middle of stuff. It's like, it's really a combined consent environment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also it's kind of that chance where you've probably had the same fight your whole relationship.
And maybe in another relationship.
And maybe in a prior relationship. And so with the diagnosis, you're almost saying, hey, I know we've had this fight for 10 years, but now we're going to change the rules of this fight. And we're going to say, this is a different reality.
Terms?
Yeah, I have different terms of this fight. And that can be very disorienting as well.
It feels like a cartoon sort of where the cartoon character has like slammed on the brakes, but the car is still and the car is further behind them than they are. Like you're kind of out of sync. Yeah. Even with yourself. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And early in a kind of a restructuring of a self, and especially with the neurodivergence diagnosis, there's a lot of the terms are, I don't actually want to have this argument, and I don't actually want to have a new argument. I just don't want to go down the same road. And the other person's like, excuse me, I need something from this. And the old argument, I didn't like it either, but at least it was something. And now you're just telling me, no, I'm not going to do it this way. And there's nothing else. It's really jarring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this actually leads to our second sort of phase, which is the revolution.
Yeah.
Reframing behaviors and explanations.
Yeah.
So post-diagnosis, the autistic person, in this case myself, begins reframing their behaviors. I'm not actually an angry person, right? I'm actually lacking executive function that provides me emotional regulation.
Or I have a sensory system that I have only seen as sight, sound, whatever it is. And now, once I've allowed that information in, turns out some of my anger was actually sensory defensiveness, right? Like this whole, it's like you change dimensions.
Yeah. Right? It is something I'm definitely learning about myself, is that I have such laser focus.
Yeah.
That I don't think that I have as much sensory sensitivity as some people. So for example, certain things they're annoying, it bothers me, but it's not so dysregulating inside. Going into a grocery store where the temperature gradients are constantly shifting does really, really bother me. I go right on edge. Wind really bothers me. But a lot of things I don't feel sensory is my main overstimulant per se. But people disrupting that laser focus really, really disorients me.
Yeah.
And it takes a minute for me to really get my feet back underneath me to even say, okay, what is executive function and emotional regulation in this moment?
Right. Because as you're describing that, I'm imagining you and myself too, even when I'm not focusing quite to the same depth. It's like somebody has grabbed you and snatched you and pulled you. And it's like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's like almost like a reflex, right?
Yes.
And
that is that is a sensory integration experience, right? Because everything that had to happen to register the incoming body or attention of the other person doesn't happen, right? And so, because that hyperfocus is so complete, in the state that you're describing, that, sight isn't working, sound isn't working, the senses that we have, like that we know somebody was looking at us, whatever it is, right? And this will definitely be either a defined or not defined, but what is pathological demand avoidance or what is persistent autonomy drive is that the sensory interruption is experienced as a threat, right? And so that reaction and the history of that reaction and the trauma of that reaction, not even just in one relationship,
right?
All of that.
And so, right, full disclosure to our audience, right? My husband is our audio engineer. So I'm not saying this without my husband knowing that we're having this conversation.
Right here.
Yeah.
Right here in the room. And something that has come up for us that we're really working on through this time is, I'm trying to deal with sensory overload, and I will be really mean.
Mm.
And let me just be honest, like I am mean. I'm dysregulated. I am not in my body. I feel like that example when like someone just like has a gut reaction to punch somebody because it's just like they're like, I'm scared, punch you in the face, right?
Yeah.
They're not meaning to punch you in the face. It was just a involuntary reaction. So much of that is happening for me right now throughout the whole day. And we do get into arguments and discussions about it. And, the common thing that comes up is I'm so sick of hearing about you being autistic. That's just an excuse.
Yeah.
And the thing that we've had to really work on together is saying, you know what, this isn't an excuse. It's an explanation.
Yeah.
And this explanation changes the way that we have this conversation.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I get to be a jerk to you. No, I don't get to be a jerk to you, right? It just means that we're going to have this conversation rather from a settled character judgment about me being an angry, volatile person to being one of, okay, you are dysregulated. You are being a jerk.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a jerk. There are ways that we can handle your dysregulation without you hurting me. How do we do that?
And this in the revolution, right? Like this is the part where it's like the disruption of everybody's autopilot. Your autopilot is to attack and his autopilot is to defend, right? And so right now you're saying like, oh, okay, well, the thing we definitely know is that when this happens, we're going to at least say, oh, right, there's a different place to start from with this. And then the longer you're sort of working on this together, the more you're going to come up, your nervous system is going to be more healed and you're going to have more environmental supports and you'll be able to like say, figure out the sequence of what kind of process needs to happen. If it is is this something that needs to be talked about right now because it's timely? How do I signal that to you? Or is this something that like, oh, I'm really bursting with it. Oh, how do I deal with that? Okay, maybe I'm going to make a voice recording and send it to you so you can listen to it later. I don't know what the steps are going to be, right? But that's kind of, what we all have to do to deal with these new opportunities we have to change the awful story of I'm incompetent, which is my story, or I'm, so angry.
Which is my story.
Well, and my story.
And I think the important thing, and this kind of reminds me of last episode where it's not, the regulation first parenting, which is what we talked about last week. It's not permissive parenting.
No.
Right? Like having my diagnosis is not permissive of me to be rude or mean or volatile.
Yeah.
It is an explanation for why that's happening, and it allows us to reframe what's happening in the moment to say, okay, if this is what's really happening in this moment, and you're not really an angry person, but you're feeling dysregulated, How can we work together to help you to find that regulation?
Well, and it's also a pivot, right? And that's kind of what I was describing is the pivot is from we keep doing things the same way, but we try to figure out how to regulate you after you've already been kind of disoriented, right? Because that's really and that's it, right? You're disoriented, right? Because your orientation is fixed. And then it becomes like you don't have a way to back out of it because there's an interruption, right? And so, yeah, regulation first parenting, regulation first living is if we're all going to prioritize like the regulation of the self, then we also have to be able to have the conversations of, so when I'm doing this in the morning, for me, this would come up a lot where my husband, bless his pointy little head, as my mother would say to me, do you know what time it is? As I'm frantically doing something, trying to get the children out the door. And I would just explode, right? Because the assumption is that if I knew what time it was, I would be doing something different. Actually, I do know what time it is, and I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And it could be helpful if you could say, like, anything I can do to help you, right?
Yeah.
But, this lovely phrase has been, bandied about as the thing that why do I overreact to it? And it's like, because I've told you 25,000 times why I overreact to it, right? But it's that, there's all these different ways that we have to pull out of, like the unconscious living.
And I think this is a nice sort of transition to the third phase that we talked about, which is the renegotiation and really rebuilding the relationship.
Yeah.
So now you've moved to a place of reframing away from a settled character judgment towards, okay, here's an underlying explanation for what's happening. And now both partners have the revelation that they can work together to find solutions.
And that they can actually have a different experience, right? Because like we said at the beginning, if you have had your relationship experiences and your lover partner has had their relationship experiences, this is a huge identity shift to say, oh, I actually can have something totally different that I couldn't have imagined was possible when I was just trying to negotiate a different transaction.
Mm-hmm. And that's when we talked about sort of the old relational power dynamics, that there's always a winner or a loser. Who caused the harm?
Somebody who knows how it should be done, somebody who doesn't do it right.
And it may be that both people are not very good at time management. One person is just a little bit better than the other, and so they're the winner because they're doing it better than you are doing it.
According to unnamed sources, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of the weird part about it. It's like, and who defined that for us?
So we had talked about the psychoanalytical concept of the third.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to sort of talk about it in the context of disrupting the relational power dynamics?
Yeah. And so, I'm sure there's some psychoanalytic nerd out there who's going to hopefully find some technical deficits because I hope that's the audience I'm reaching. But when I use the concept of a third, it's that when, say, you're in the old-fashioned language, you're the analysand and the analysist, and then the third is something else. The third is the painful relationship with a sibling, right? And so then that third becomes a place where things are able to move because they don't just go back and forth. And so in my work clinically and also in my lived experience, I've found that like the third is often the diagnosis, the executive function difficulty, the learning disability, and that we, either me and my husband or me and my child and my husband, we start to say like, well, since this is another character in this story, and we can either leave it unconscious and it becomes like an imp that sabotages and disrupts in a bad way, or we can invite it in and say, use the time management example. My husband has good time management in some ways, and I tend to know what time of day it is. He tends to know if we have to get somewhere like an airplane, Whereas I'm like, I think I need to make snacks from scratch, right? And so, in the olden days, before I had a diagnosis and before he, understood his own and this, that, and the other thing, it would be this superiority thing. Like I would not literally be saying this, like, well, at least I know what time of day it is. And he'd be like, well, at least I can leave the house without trying to make, homemade cookies. And so now what we do is we kind of collaborate with it. And I've joked that since I met him, it's not 5 o'clock until the sun goes down. So the day goes on forever in the summer. And so now instead of like waiting for him to notice that it's the end of the day and the kids need to this, that, or the other thing, we sort of joke about it like, oh, hey, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, or, to make it sort of like, here's a truth that we both agree. We both agree there's like a blip, right? Other people might be able to know exactly what time of day it is for dinner, and other people might know, like, oh, the plants all need to be watered, or, something needs to happen. But it's okay. We can just hold it lightly. Like, we can just kind of bumble towards it together. We can laugh about it. We can rely on the other person. Because, like you said, birds of a feather, right? And sometimes there are complementary executive function deficits.
Right. And I think that this is something that we had talked about, was this idea of recommitting after diagnosis.
Yeah.
And that this can look a lot like redating.
Yeah.
Just sort of saying, yeah, I have this narrative and assumptions of who you are and why you do the things you do and what you do. And, if I were to date you from scratch and know that this was an element, I probably would approach this differently, because there would be different, I wouldn't have a history of hurt or narrative that I have built around this.
Yeah.
And so, I think we had talked about, you can even sort of build new couple agreements through this shared knowledge through time, and that's an essential part of this renegotiation process. And it's not easy, right? We're constantly working on it. I think we talk about it every couple days. This is an iterative process. And this episode was really hard for me. And you were just like, I got you. I've been doing this for 10 years. So, I think the point here in the message is it will get easier.
Yeah.
Right? You just got to keep recommitting to that renegotiation as a couple. And so with that today, I'd actually like to just wrap up by reminding you that today was the first in our disclosure series, our mini disclosure series about diagnosing with a lover. Subscribe to the podcast to hear next week's episode, the second in the series, on disclosing your diagnosis to friends. Please like, share, or comment. We look forward to getting to know you.
All right. See you next time.
This episode of Following the Threads is inspired by the Unmasking Diary, snippets from the book After the Masquerade, a memoir by Natasha Stavros. The Unmasking Autism Diary, memoir excerpt on recommitting to a long-term relationship after a late diagnosis of autism. My husband and I just had a really big moment in couples counseling. We've been going for nearly 2 years. Going through infertility, moving across the country, going through really rough work situations every other year, we needed to rebuild. At first, it started because I resented him for being a man and because I was angry. I was so angry that I almost died giving birth, and then I had to go back to work. I was angry that to manage my CPTSD and OCD as part of the postpartum anxiety, I still had to keep things together, pay the bills, organize everything, literally give my nutrients to our baby. And he was tired and struggling to transition to being a dad. I had no empathy for him. I was angry. I wanted more support. What I didn't realize was that I didn't need more support from him. He was doing it. He was there, being supportive. What I needed support from was society. Then we navigated some more work challenges before I finally was diagnosed autistic. This whole time, my husband was asking for more intimacy. I didn't understand. What did he want? I loved him. I chose him. We were in sync, supporting each other through the ebb and flow of life. I was giving all I could. What more could I do? Then, today, we realized that this is the first time in our relationship that we were both going through formative experiences, shaping who we were becoming. This means that everything we've done to be in a relationship might not hold, or at the very least, it might not be what needs to happen for us to work in our new selves. In essence, we are becoming different versions of ourselves, and we would need to learn how to be in a relationship together again. I saw a meme about a grandson who asked his grandfather how he loved one woman for 65 years. And the grandfather says that he loved many versions of the same woman, but it wasn't the same woman for all 65 years. That's where we are. We've been together for over 10 years. We are learning new things and having experiences that are changing who we are. We need time and space to learn who each of us are in these experiences, not just a projection of who we remember each other once to be. We need to revisit what it is to date, to lean into curiosity and establish trust, to build a new relationship in these new versions of ourselves. I decided we need to date again. Really date. Like, get to know each other's wants and needs from scratch, without assumptions, based on a misunderstood history. He agreed. Our therapist too. This text is a snippet from my next book, After the Masquerade. For early access to the book and other resources, upgrade to a paid subscription via Substack at natashastavros.substack.com. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of Following the Threads. I'm Natasha Stavros, co-host and executive producer, here with Sarah Liebman, co-host, Linda Highfield, director, and Noah Smith, audio engineer and composer.